Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Alex from Alex May Drums, and today I'm recreating a track from Shingo Nakamura called Golden Leaves. He's one of my favorite progressive house artists, or chill house, melodic house, however you want to phrase it. So I'm just going to walk you through what I did to recreate this track, as it's one of my favorite tracks to listen to, and I had a lot of fun recreating it. So just to dive right in here, the intro section, if we just start out with the piano, which he's largely known for in a lot of his songs, it's kind of that chill piano that goes in the background, but it's still kind of up front in the mix. If we just listen to this real quick. You'll see that there aren't really too complicated or complex chords. A lot of these are really just two notes on here. So he writes in a lot of fifths, and what that does is allows you to open up a lot of the frequency spectrum to other elements. A lot of his mixes, and the reason that I think he has the sound that he does is because he's able to layer several different sounds on top of his compositions, and they don't really clash with each other. You can hear everything pretty clearly, and that's part due to the mixing as well, but a large part of that is due to the arrangement process. So there's an article that I found that I will link in the description of the video from Music Radar, where it's plugins that he uses. And this piano sound is used a lot on at least his past few years releases. It's just the Noir piano library from Contact from Native Instruments. So I just pulled this up here. I don't think I really changed anything. I may have dialed in the color a little bit more. This has got some light compression on it, the OTT, which is another plugin that he uses. I've got this dialed down to about 30%, so it's really just bringing up, if I turn this on and off a little bit and solo the piano. It's bringing up a little bit more of the body of the piano, mellows out some of the attack, but brings it a little more forward in the mix so it can kind of compete with the drums and everything. If I unsolo this, you'll hear in the beginning passage, you've also got these pads in the background that I just have two of right here. And then some sound effects. I just found a clip of some birds, a field recording I got somewhere, I don't know where. But I'll get into those a little bit later with the effects as well. So from the pianos, I'm not doing any group processing from that. Again, it's just processing at the actual track level. So some compression. The utility here is just a plugin that I have on this to just give it a little bit of a raise in volume in that intro, and I believe that's actually all that it's doing, this whole track. So another part two of this essentially is going to be the drums. As a drummer, this is obviously pretty interesting to me, especially going in and recreating this particular drum beat. I feel like, at least from my perspective, being a rock guy, you think of electronic music as like, oh, it's just kind of that kind of stuff, like techno 4 on the floor beat. But this was a lot of work to get right. It's just a 4 on the floor kick, which you can hear if I just solo the drums on let's do over here where everything comes in. Here's what just the drums sound like. So you've got a lot of different elements in here. There's this kick, just a one-shot sample that I found. Don't know where. I'm doing a bit of EQ. I tried to match this as close as possible to the original kick in the song, and I think I tried another EQ curve that didn't work out quite as well, so stuck with that. And again, the gain is just automating some level later on in the track. There's another kick I was auditioning, but it didn't work out quite as well as that one. So with the drums here, I'm also layering in these claps. And what the claps sound like, just on the 2 and 4. And then I've also got this other one that's kind of on the offbeat down here. So if you look at kind of all of these right here, you've got 2 and 4 for the main ones. And then you've got kind of this offbeat one it's on the, just before the 4th beat on every measure. And that adds a little bit of anticipation going into the next beat. So those combined all together, I don't have any processing other than some compression on here. And the samples that I found were a little wide, and I wanted to keep those a little more narrow to give width to other elements in the mix. So you can see I'm just using the Ableton utility plugin to dial down the width just a little bit. I didn't want it full mono, but I didn't want it completely wide in stereo. So with the kick and the clap, you can already hear that it's starting to get a nice kind of groove to it. And a lot of the additional sound that you hear in this kind of music are the closed hi-hats you just kind of have on the offbeat. And then for this particular song, he's also got some additional hi-hats going in here, which add a little bit more flavor to it. They're a little lower in the mix, but they do add a little bit of just kind of, lead into those hi-hats. So again, found a close hi-hat sample here. I didn't like the initial attack in here, so I shortened the sample to get it sounding a little bit more like the one that's actually in the song. And then use the ROM Reverb by Native Instruments. This is another plugin that he utilizes a lot, particularly in claps, percussions, and a lot of melodic elements. At one point, this was free from Native Instruments. I don't believe it's free anymore, but it's pretty cheap and it sounds amazing. From what I've read, how he uses it and how I use it as well, you just open up the default, crank the mix to 100 if you're using it on one of your return buses. In this case, I'm using it as an insert, so I've got the mix dialed in, and then adjust the decay. If it's got a little bit too much of a buildup in the lower the high end, you can always adjust these filters there. So this, you can hear, it gives it a little bit more just dimensionality in here. If I have this off and I just listen to just the close hi-hat, very narrow, very kind of right down the center field in here. With the reverb on, it gives a little bit more space, and it's a little bit there, but that does add up in the context of all of the other percussion elements that you have there. So additional hi-hat as well, snare roll, that's something that's happening a little later. So again, if we go back to all the drums, close out of this round instrument, we've got a few different percussion layers. And this was one of the things that I had a lot of fun diving into, because you can get a lot of percussion loops. Production Music Live makes a lot of killer ones. You can see here I've chopped up a Cashmere top loop sample to kind of fit what I heard in the original track. And then there was a shaker sound in the background that I couldn't quite find a loop for, so I just kind of made it myself out of MIDI. I just picked a few shaker samples, again from the Cashmere pack, and then just kind of dialed them out in MIDI there. With these, again, they were a little too wide, so I just kind of narrowed down the width a little bit. Again, didn't want to make them fully mono, but didn't want to have them too wide. And then I've also got these shakers down here. And a cool trick that I've learned in studying and recreating a lot of this type of music is that if you use a few different shaker loops and pan these hard left and hard right, it gives a little bit more width to it. You'll see all of these shaker loops are already stereo files, but by panning them right and left, it gives you a little bit more stereo width, obviously, but it also kind of creates a little bit more of a groove because they're not perfectly synced all the time. So you kind of get a little bit of differentiation between your right and your left speaker or headphone, and that just adds a little bit more to the groove. So if I go back up to the drum bus here and I close out on this bottom part so we can kind of hear it all. This is the final drum track, how it sounds. If I go ahead and mute some of these shakers, it still sounds pretty good, but you lose a little bit of that kind of forward movement in there. So this shaker is pretty low in the mix. I've got a little bit of a send going to the ROM reverb that I have in here. And again, with this is what in the world is happening here? So normally it doesn't look like this. I don't know why this is full of emojis, but for whatever reason, this is the decay, and I've apparently adjusted this to whatever that time is. So, and then if we put in the other shakers, that's where you get a lot more of that stereo width. So already with just the drums and the piano, we'll increase the loop a little bit more. You can hear that that's already sounding really nice. It's sounding like a really kind of nice forward-moving groove. It's got a chill piano track on there that the groove accentuates and kind of moves it forward at a nice leisurely pace that's quick, but not, like super fast, like breakbeat or techno style. So on the drums bus, what I'm doing here, I originally started out using OTT on this. And again, if I solo just the drums, we'll hear what this sounds like. But for this particular one, I wasn't huge on the sound of OTT. I felt it was a little bit too much. It was bringing out a lot of the shakers. OTT can have a kind of side effect of bringing out a lot of the treble transients in particular. and I wasn't liking what that was doing with the shakers. So my go-to compressor is usually an SSL style compressor, and that's for, you know, really any genre of music. So I just used the stock glue compressor in Ableton Live. This isn't unique to Ableton. You can actually buy this. It's called The Glue by this company, Cytomic, but it's included with Ableton, which is pretty killer. So with this, I just go ahead and kill the ducking on here from the side chain. It's without the glue compressor. And with it, really you'll see all it's doing is, I don't know, 2 to 3 decibels of gain reduction. I'm not even doing any makeup on there because it doesn't really sound like it's doing a whole lot of volume reduction. It's a slow attack and a quick release, so it's really just there to kind of grab that kick movement and have that be a little more reined in, and that'll help later on in your mastering and your mixing process, because that kick isn't going to be quite as pokey in your mix, if that makes sense. A side effect of a lot of SSL compressors is that whatever it compresses, it adds a little bit of harmonic information to that as well. So by compressing the kick like this, every time it compresses the kick, you're adding a little bit more harmonic information that helps bring the kick forward, even though it's compressing it. So now that we've got the drums and the piano kind of talked about here, let's move on to the bass. So for this, I've only got 2 bass tracks. And I've got the bass guitar, which this is just a sample library, again, from Native Instruments. This is an older library. It's the Scarby MM bass, which is a Music Man bass. For this particular track, to me, it sounded like it was more of an acoustic style electric bass rather than a synthesizer bass. Shingo Nakamura is known for using the Monarch plugin inside of Reactor. It's based off of a Moog. I don't know which actual keyboard it's based off of, but some kind of a Moog keyboard, and that's responsible for a lot of his bass sounds. But for this one in particular, it called for a little bit more of a live sounding electric bass, so that's actually what you'll hear in this. It's a little more groovy. And then with that, I've got this sub bass to carry in a little bit more of the low end, because especially in any type of electronic music, you want to have that kind of sub 60 hertz filling that in, which this bass doesn't particularly have a lot of. You can even see on the EQ here, I've pretty much cut out a lot of the top action on the string articulation and really just left some of like the fundamental notes on here. So added in with the sub bass. Especially with headphones or studio monitors, you should be able to hear a little bit more of the low end accentuation just being brought up by this sub bass. The sub bass is actually a preset in Massive that I found. There's another channel that I found when I was doing some research on how to make this track. I had started it and just typed into YouTube how to write music like Shingo Nakamura. And I found another channel. There's a guy named The Deucer. Definitely check him out. I'll link him in the description section as well. So he recommended this patch, and it's awesome. It's just a default patch in the Massive library called Apologize This. It's a really nice sub bass. And with this, you can see on here, I'm just EQing out the top end. I'm doing some sidechain compression from a kick, so you get that kind of pumping when the kick is hitting on that 4 on the floor beat. And then on the bass bus that I have these both routed to, I'm kind of doing the same thing. So I'm doing just a little bit of sidechain compression from the kick on there. I'm taking out, I believe, a little bit of around 600 hertz. Let's see, yeah, right around 550, 600 hertz right here. Just some of that honky mid-range that you get out of in a clean active pickup on an electric bass like a Music Man. I did play around with a couple different chorus widening plugins on here in an attempt to just kind of make it sound a little wider. But when I was A-Bing it with the original track, it actually didn't sound quite as wide, so I ended up turning these off. But these are both cool plugins. Chorus Bass is a preset in Ableton, and then this Juno Chorus is literally just the chorus module from a Juno keyboard that Arturia makes. So if we put those all together, so far we've got piano, bass, and then we've got our drums. So you've already got kind kind of that full frequency coverage. You've got the low end from the bass and the kick, you've got the mid-range and the melodic element from the piano, and then you've got a full spectrum from all of the drums, and especially with the shakers, you get that additional top end on there. So the rest is just a lot of little things that these were fun to program and kind of like little Easter eggs to find in the song. There's different elements that he adds in his composition that adds a little bit more of an organic feel. So in this case, the next thing we're going to take a look at is this string section here. So with this, I'm just using a contact library, Session Strings 2. And with this, I've just kind of programmed out the singular notes that I heard in the song. They sounded a little too kind of clean and orchestral for me. So as one would do if anything sounds too clean, you throw it through the decapitator and just distort the crap out of it. So this is what that sounds like with and without the decapitator. Very nice string samples, super clean, awesome for orchestral, just backing tracks. So again, it's not, super distorted, but it does add a little bit more grit, and you can even see on the EQ here where I've rolled off a lot of the low end. If I turn this decapitator on and off, you can look right around here, some of these harmonics disappear. Turn it back on. You can see you get a lot more of these, I'm not sure which order harmonics those are, but you get a lot more of the harmonic information, and that does help it poke through the mix a lot more. So particularly with this technique, it's a good way to help bring organic elements more to the forefront, much like OTT does in the way that we've used that in the piano tracks. And again, the ROM reverb, standard go-to. This I actually have 100% wet. It's kind of what it sounds like without it. So again, pretty clean, awesome string samples that they make. But then putting it through just 100%, it definitely tucks it back in the mix a little bit more, but it gives you more of that kind of airy width to it. And then when you add that in with everything else, it gives its own sense of space. So while this is playing through, we can see in the timeline here that we've got this section here where this break goes in. Over to here. This is where the song kind of reaches the bridge or the middle 8 where it just kind of mellows out. And this is where you hear these more electronic elements being introduced. These two stabs right here. A lot of Shingo Nakamura's earlier music relied a lot more heavily on some of these stabs, just these plucky sounds, and I really like how he incorporates that with the organic elements like the piano and the strings and things like that. So I did my best to recreate these. He uses Diva. I don't have Diva, so I was trying to just do some sound design and get as close as possible to these. So for this lead stab here, it's just a little bit of just notes on here. You'll see it's just a pluck sound, and I've actually automated the filter frequency on here. So you can see as it progresses through the song, the filter's just giving you a little bit more of a cutoff. And with this, all it really is a sine wave. So you've got a basic kind of sine wave pluck. And then I've added in at a lower volume this wavetable of a sitar. Because to me, it sounded like in the original song, it was almost a stringed instrument, almost guitar-leading sort of sounding pluck, which you can also hear in his song Glow. So that's what that is. I've also done some EQ on these as well, which you can see on here, just really boosting at about, 1.5K or so. Valhalla Supermassive. This is another biggie that Shingo Nakamura uses a lot. This is really cool. Valhalla DSP makes a lot of killer products. This one in particular is free, and it works awesome as a reverb, as a delay, as a kind of combination of both. You see with this one, I've actually just got this on the default. I dialed down the mix. I think I lowered the feedback a little bit and then just did a dotted eighth note delay just to give you a little bit of that kind of feedback on there. So with and without that, here's what it sounds like. with it. You can hear the filter just kind of open up a little bit more as it progresses as well. And the utility, I just use that for volume automation in some different places. There's also a harmony that kind of goes along with this. If we listen to this, it's very short, but it's more of a saw wave sound. You've got a lot more harmonic information than just the sine wave pluck, and a longer release on here as well. So you can see what I've done with this is I just have 2 oscillators doing a saw wave. Normally I'll detune one. I'm not sure why I have them both at the exact same position, but whatever. I guess it worked. So with this, again, it's just if I loop this particular passage here, you can see it's just a pluck sound. You've got the amplifier envelope, so the attack, decay, sustain, release, controlling this filter's frequency. So every time the note plays, it kind of opens up a lot more of the treble on there. And then with this, I've got this sub oscillator on, which is something cool in Wavetable. I feel like Wavetable in Ableton is really a slept-on synthesizer because it's really cool in just the way you can route everything. You can make a whole ton of sounds. You can import your own wavetables in here as well. And you essentially have 3 different oscillators, including this sub. So without the sub, it still sounds pretty cool, but you lose a little bit of that low end. So with the sub, it's just adding in, I believe that's just a sine wave, and you can shape kind of the tone with that a little bit more just to make it kind of give it a little bit more thickness to that. I'm not even adding any unison to this, which is just multiple voices that can kind of help it spread out a little bit more. So it's fairly straight and narrow down the middle. And then if I add these together, again, I've got Valhalla Supermassive. I may have just copied and pasted this to keep it kind of the same, so they're both kind of congruent with each other. So with everything there, this is what it sounds like in this section. And then while this plays, duck down the volume so you can hear me a little bit better. You can hear in the background, I've got these pads playing, and I've also got these kind of bird sounds going on in the background. Turn these up. Real low in the mix, but it adds a little bit of just kind of an organic texture in the background there. Ooh, that's not what I meant to do. And that's something that I had heard in the original mix as well, so I tried to just find some Foley sounds with some birds to kind of give it a little bit more of that particular sound. And then that's layered actually with these 2 pads that I've got going on. Turn these up a bit. Very wide, spacious sounding pads. That's due to a few different things, so I don't believe I really have much processing on the pads other than a filter that kind of just goes in and out depending on where it's at in the track. I believe I actually filtered this kind of in the beginning, just as it's coming in. And that's pretty much all the automation aside from volume, because at different points, if you listen to the original song, the pad and atmospheric elements kind of flow a little bit as the song progresses. When the song's more busy, we've got more percussion elements and things going on. That atmospheric element is ducked down a little bit more in the mix, but then when you've got this break section in here where it's more of kind of like the chill break before the outro, those come up in volume a bit more just to kind of accentuate the spaciousness of that track, and then those kind of help out in going into the next section of the song with these effects here as well. So if I play this last part, got just a crash cymbal, fades out. I think I added EQ, again, raw and reverb, sidechain compression on there, and then just a riser. So for this one, it's just some white noise, reverb, delay, sidechain compression again. By the way, the sidechain compression, I'm not running from the actual kick that I have going in the session. I've created a whole separate sidechain kick up here that's only going to the send, so it's completely inaudible, but this is just used to only trigger the ducking and the sidechain compression throughout the song, because as you'll see in the drums, there's a few different points where the kick drum will actually cut out for a few measures, but you still want some of that pumping and ducking sound going on in the other elements of the mix. So that's definitely something to have there as well. And along with the effects, even though I've got this kind of up towards the top and not in the effects bus that I have, I was playing around with getting a little bit more of that ebb and flow of the risers and the transitional effects. So what I ended up doing was just creating a really long clip of white noise. So I only have this coming in at very certain points of the song. You'll see on the automation here, I've just automated the gain so you can hear it. It just kind of comes in and fades out. Honestly, you could do the same thing with different risers and effects, as you'll see that I've got here in the bottom, but I feel like there was some kind of depth that I was still missing with that. So just something I kind of tried out to emulate the sound of the track, and it works good for transitions here as well. And then just kind of ducks down and fades back into the break. So really, without this utility plugin on here, if I can find out where I put this. If I turn this off, it's just sidechained white noise. I EQ'd out pretty much everything below, what is this, about 300? Yeah, 337 hertz. Just a white noise generator through massive. Got the sidechain, got some reverb. Give it a little bit more width, kill out some of the higher frequencies. Then I've got an auto filter going. There's a few points in the song where I believe that auto filter is just kind of ducking out the frequency, particularly in the beginning. And then just some delay to kind of give it a little bit more of a delay tail as it goes on, so it doesn't just immediately cut out. So I'm going to re-enable that utility. And then as far as other tracks on here, again, I've got the effects. I just have some different risers and some crash cymbals that I've grabbed different samples from. I have this white noise sample. So again, very similar to a white noise track. It's just I apparently did it the hard way too, because I felt like that wasn't enough. I've got some crashes here that help transition into different points of the song. So in the context of the mix. And this is a crash that I ended up actually just normally sounds like this, but I wanted to use that as a riser instead. So if you tap R in Ableton, it reverses the clip. So instead of a crash and then it kind of decays into that naturally, you have the reverse where it swells into it. So that adds a cool transitional effect. If you've got a cool crash that you like, you can throw some reverb and delay on it, which is usually kind of a go-to for different transitional effects like that. And then that's what this section sounds like. And really, those are all of the tracks that I had in there, aside from the vocals. Now, again, I mentioned earlier, there's another channel, The Deucer. In his video, he mentioned that there's a website called vocalremover.org where you can put in a song in there and it removes, or it separates the vocals and the music. So I was able to pretty well isolate the vocals in here. So here's what those sound like, and they're just completely dry, just volume. And that's how they were printed in the actual track. So those are the only thing I haven't recreated, just because, you know, I don't know what the sample pack was or if he had somebody sing that, and I certainly can't sing, so I wasn't going to try it. So with the mix, that's what this sounds like. And in the outro here, you can hear this is where a lot of those elements really come together. So you can hear the pads now. You've got all of the groove going with the different percussive elements. As the song approaches its end, you can hear that some of the elements start to drop out one by one. So the kick will stop, you know, a few seconds before, 30 seconds or so before the end of the song. Claps will continue for a few measures, then drop out. You've got the hi-hats that continue on going, as well as some of the percussion, but the percussion starts to slowly dip out too. So it's a very cool way, just arrangement-wise, if you're working on a track and you don't want it to just come to an abrupt stop or do just, you know, the kind of cliche fade out. you can just start taking away individual elements, and then you can hear it's a very natural flow. And that being said, I did do an actual fade out on here on the master bus where you can see the gain is automated to just go down. Let's see, where is that gain? So on the last 4 measures or so, it's just going to kind of gain down on there. So as far as effects and processing, this was something I had fun with as well. So my effects, I've kind of mentioned those a little bit already. My reverb that I'm using, the main verb for this track, is the round reverb from Native Instruments. Again, this is one that Shingo Nakamura really relies heavily on from what I've read. This one, because it's on a return, it's got the mix 100%. If you put this on an individual track, you would want to adjust that just to taste. And then the decay, you're going to want to adjust that as well to just the timing of the track. So the way that I typically will time that is, especially if you go up to like your claps, you can time that so that the reverb decays by the time the next clap happens. So you've got a clap, the reverb, and then the next clap, and it kind of bounces up. And that can also help add a lot of movement and just stereo width there as well. Next one, I've just got your stock Ableton delay, dotted eighth note here, 40% feedback. Those I have, I think, on most of the kind of melodic elements. If I am using that, that's usually my go-to. But I believe I actually put those just right on the track in this instance with the Valhalla Supermassive on there. Yep, dotted eighth delay. And then lastly, Supermassive reverb. This I actually have, I believe the only thing that I'm really sending this to is there is a piano lead that comes in a few times in the song. A few times, I guess it only comes in once. So it's over here, and that's what this sounds like. So with this piano lead, it's the exact same piano sound that I have, or it's the exact same library rather, that I have for the main piano chords. If I loop this and only play these two. But for this one, it's processed a little differently because you'll see on here, OTT, just stands for over the top. It's a multi-band compressor. This I've got the amount cranked up on. So without, and then with. So very obvious, you can kind of hear the compressive nature that it's putting on this track. So in isolation, it probably sounds a little too over the top, no pun intended. But in the context of the mix, it really helps it poke through. So as far as my master bus, now typically I'll do master bus processing on here, but I'm actually doing it on a group up here. Reason for that being is on the actual master bus from the output of Ableton Live, I'm using this Metric AB plugin, which this is really cool because this allows you to drop in a track that you want to reference, and you can literally A and B between the two tracks. So A is what I have in my DAW here, what I've recreated in Ableton. B is the original release track. So this was cool for me because it allowed me to really isolate in on different things like the stereo image, just frequency balance, the dynamics and the loudness, but not only just using your ears and just hearing like, oh, okay, this sounds a little bit more wide, or this is more percussive in this particular one. So something cool with that. If I just, kind of pick, I don't know, this part here, I'll go back right before the break. I'll switch back. Again, when it's blue, A, that's what I've recreated. B, orange, is the original track. So here's what those sound like. So super helpful to reference things. It's not exact, obviously, but I feel really happy with how close I got, just especially with the amount of time I spent on this. So the master bus processing I am doing to this track, and the reason I'm doing it up here again is so that it doesn't also do it on the track that I have referencing. Just doing EQ8, cutting out everything below 30 hertz because that's generally not too important. So if I find a part of the song where pretty much every element is in, we'll just kind of loop that. Let's just do kind of right before here. Doing some compression. This is again an SSL style bus compressor. Nothing too heavy-handed, much like the drum bus. It's catching the kick drum. Enable this. Slow attack, fast release, just kind of grabbing the kick on that. That on and off. Again, it glues everything together. It's a common thing that everybody says about an SSL style compressor is it glues everything together. I love this Scooter tape machine by Universal Audio. They've recently made this native. I've got a Universal Audio satellite and an interface, so I can run the plugin as well. But if I'm traveling or working not at home or where my interface is, I can use this just wherever. So what this sounds like without. Adds a little bit more bump in the low end, smooths off some of the transients, has a little bit more harmonic content, all that good stuff tape does without the hassle of having to actually cut tape and calibrate machines and all that stuff. I don't think anybody really misses that part. And then for mastering, this is just an EQ that I did to kind of match the frequency curves of the original song. Again, not really doing a whole lot in this. I did a 3 decibel boost. Am I running this in mid-side? Yes, so I am running this in mid-side mode, meaning that the center channel is processed differently from the outside stereo channel, if that makes sense. So essentially, the frequencies that you have going on straight down the middle channel, or what you would kind of perceive as being in the middle, I'm boosting some 400 hertz right in there, and really not doing anything else in the mid-band. But for the sides, a cool trick you can do with mid-side processing, and it is very easy to go overboard with this, so approach this with the light hand, is you can dip down some of the low-end content. In here, I'm dipping down 1 decibel at 50 hertz on the sides. So that means it's really just putting the bass content more in the center channel, because you don't always want your bass to be, this huge nebulous thing that's just surrounding you from all directions. It helps really focus that kick drum, which is very important in these kind of genres. Really most kind of genres now that I think about it. And then with that, adding a little bit more 400 in the same amount that I'm doing on the mid. So that, I believe, was just because I felt like when I was comparing the tracks, the overall track was just missing a little bit of that particular kind of low-mid frequency there. And then on the sides, I'm doing a 2 decibel boost at about 12.5 kilohertz. And that just is another cool mastering trick that you can do if you boost the treble or the high end on just the sides. It gives you a little bit more stereo width. So I'll play this with and without the EQ. So without the EQ, and again, really listen for kind of the side separation. Again, slight changes, but it all kind of adds up. And then just for quick mastering, using Ozone as well. This was really helpful in also using the Metric AB plugin, because I could reference kind of how loud this was and where the dynamics needed to be, particularly like the stereo width and things like that, which I didn't really approach through Ozone in this particular instance. Usually I'll use something like the Imager or the Exciter if I'm feeling the track is a little too narrow. But with this one, I typically did it on a track-by-track basis, as I mentioned earlier with those utility plugins, just kind of narrowing down the certain things that didn't need to be too wide, and that way the things that are already naturally wide don't have to fight for that space. So really with this, just doing multi-band compression across the board, very light. I think it's generally about 1 to 2 decibels. It's like the 3 or 4 on the low end here. But, electronic music, you've got that punchy, hard-hitting kick, so you want to keep that in check. Doing a little bit less in the low mids here. You can hear Just kind of keep that in check. Not really too much in this band up here, from about 847 to about 4K. And then I'm not even doing anything to the top. I felt like that didn't need any additional reining in or compression. And then just, good old maximizer, make it loud. I'm really selling this short. It's a limiter, it cuts off peaks, but with multi-stages of compression as I've used in this, it does help to give that extra push with the limiter. You can see it's just kind of shaving off some of these peaks here, but you're still getting a good loudness meter on here. Your RMS is around -9, -7. Somewhere I think it's on here, it shows how many LUFS that is, but again, that's more nerdy stuff that other people like to get into, and it is important, but I basically just did this by ear to kind of level match. So yeah, that was the song, and that's how I recreated it. This was a lot of fun to work on because I love all the sounds that he uses. So just finding out some of the different plugins that he uses in his normal workflow, listening to him for years on his compositional techniques about where elements come in, duck out, and how they kind of come together at the end and the outro usually really adds for that kind of final push. But a lot of this in the arrangement sense is, I feel like he's got a really great grasp on just arrangement and style as far as writing goes, because like I mentioned with the piano, it's not the super complex, just every chord is a minor seventh or some kind of, inversion where there's 7 notes stacked on top of each other, and then you've also got synths going on in the background, you've got 4 different basses going on. It's very well thought out from the beginning, and this was really neat to recreate because it was fun to see that not everything needs to be super complicated. Listening to a song like this sounds like there's a lot going on, and there is, but that a lot of stuff that is going on is kind of the sum of, greater than the sum of all of its parts, rather than just everything needs to be just dimed out to the max, OTT on everything. So a little goes a long way in this, and just kind of prepping the arrangement makes it for a really easy listen. And that's one of the several reasons why I really like listening to his tracks, and I'm excited to hear his new release that he's got coming out, I think in about 3 weeks now at this point. So thanks for watching. I'm going to go ahead and play this track through from start to finish. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you'd like to see more videos kind of like these, I'm going to be doing more videos just to songs that I like, and it's really just limited to that. Anything from rock songs, punk songs, pop, metal, progressive house, techno, anything that I like listening to. I like just kind of getting in the heads of the artists and figuring out what their process is, because that helps me understand things as a musician and a producer, and that also helps me reiterate that and help out my clients when I'm working with them. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about it. And if you'd like to work together, I'd love to hear your music and see what we can come up with. So thanks again for watching. Here's the rest of the track.